first and foremost, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us today. For a little bit of context, I'll give a brief introduction. As pretty much everyone that's here, whether participant or panelist, it should come as no surprise to you that e-commerce has been growing steadily now for the better part of 3 decades, since the early 90s. The largest has occurred in the span of just weeks, and we're witnessing it right now firsthand. In a mere 8 weeks, starting in early March, e-commerce's share grew more than it had grown in the previous decade to 27% of total retail, catapulting e-commerce 10 years into the future in just weeks. The challenging circumstances that we find ourselves in have forced new buyers who were previously reluctant to e-commerce to plunge in headfirst, while existing omni-channel shoppers are shifting more and more of their spend online. While admittedly some of this gain has come out of circumstance and even necessity, the key questions remain. How will things look like 1 year, 2 year, 10 years into the future? And how can merchants who are seeing record high volumes today retain these customers over the long run? These are the key questions that will form the themes of our discussion today. For this discussion, we've gathered an expert panel of e-commerce thought leaders across customer experience, design, fraud prevention, marketing, and more to share insights on how brands can take these current circumstantial, potentially one-time shoppers and turn them into lifelong customers and advocates. Before we jump into our questions, I'd love to introduce the rest of the panel. You'll all know me already. I'm Mario, head of marketing at Shippo, and I'd like to kick it over to Adam from Route to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everybody. Really great to be joining you today. For those of you who don't know, Route is focused entirely on the post-purchase experience. So we're excited to contribute today with the unique view that we have about customer sentiment and impact of everything that happens from the time that a customer actually reaches an order confirmation page until they actually handle the thing that they bought, and really the impact of doing that well, and certainly navigating a lot of those uncertainties that have come in those delivery stages. So excited to be a part of this today.
Awesome, thanks Adam. Next we got Cheri from Hawke Media.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for taking time out today to join us on our webinar. I work at Hawke Media. We are your outsourced CMO. So the main purpose at Hawke is to create accessibility to great marketing for everyone. Our model is a little different. We do not have long-term contracts. We go month to month. We do service all aspects of digital marketing. So please take a look at Hawke if you need some assistance.
Awesome, excited to have you. All right, David from Avex.
Yeah, hi. So, we're development and kind of growth agency. We specialize in e-commerce on Shopify and Shopify Plus. We not only work to make our clients' web presence look really good and basically show their true selves, but we also help with their customer experience in a variety of.
Awesome. All right, and closing out the panel for today is Jonathan from Forder.
Hey y'all, so I'm Jonathan from Forder. If you don't know about us, Forder is a fraud prevention solution that helps merchants accurately identify and stop fraud and abusive behavior on your sites, ranging from payments fraud and protecting against payments fraud, account protection, and policy abuse protection. So a wide range of fraud prevention across the entire customer journey. Excited to be here today.
Awesome. All right, thank you everyone. We've got a great panel and we're gonna jump straight ahead into questions. A little bit of context on formatting here. I know several of you have submitted questions in advance. Thank you very much for doing so. Myself and the panelists have tried to take as many of those questions as possible and bundle them into a series of 5 thematic questions that we will all run through as a panel. If you have additional points to add or points of clarification, please drop them in the chat, and I promise I will do my absolute best to surface that. If it's relevant to a current discussion, I'll try my best to interject your point with the panel. barring that, we'll try our best to retain some time at the end to go through any net new questions from the audience. But without further ado, why don't we get into our first discussion topic of the day, which is how can merchants ensure that they're providing the best customer experience for these new customers? As you heard from the intro, e-commerce as a whole is up significantly. From Shippo data alone, we've seen roughly a 100% increase in order volume since early March, and I know a lot of my partners are seeing similar data. Much of this is coming from net new buyers. I know at Shopify's conference yesterday, they shared a statistic that almost 50% of customers are net new to these merchants. So the key question for merchants right now is how can they deliver an experience that's going to help them to retain these customers over the long run. And to kick things off, I'll kick it over to David from Avex to share some insights on this first question.
Sure, yeah. So essentially my view on merchants is that you guys are really problem solvers trying to crack the code of the consumer need, which is really the biggest way to kind of reach your audience and kind of give them what they're essentially looking for. To do that, a lot of things you can do, one of which is optimizing on-page content. So regardless of your vertical, whether you're selling coffee or candles or CBD oil, you really should be experts in your specific category so that you know what kind of content, whether it be descriptions or copy or even kind of imagery, that should go on a page to essentially meet that solution and kind of make people confident that, okay, they know what I want, they know what I need, and they kind of serve that in the best way. So I think that's a great way of delivering the best kind of customer experience, is really meeting to them and investing in, content, UX copywriting, when people do come to your site.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Great insight, David. And I think very much related to what I'm going to ask next from Cheri from Hawke, sticking to the marketing and customer experience side. From your experience, Cheri, what can merchants be doing from a marketing or a lifecycle perspective to really focus on retention and deliver the best possible experience for these new customers?
It's a great question right now. I mean, we're seeing unprecedented growth in email at the moment. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've had the closures of brick and mortar, which is driving, for our benefit, more folks online. So we're seeing email rates, opens and clicks increase by 40% from March to April, and they just continue to grow. So something that you need to make sure that you're focusing on is that first initial contact with these new customers. What does your pop-up look like? What does your pop-up look like on mobile? Are you doing the same messaging that you're doing in your mobile pop-up as your desktop pop-up? We want to make sure that that first impression that they're getting to your brand is a happy one, is an engaging one. There's lots of ways to make sure that you're capturing the email, putting them into a welcome series that's customizable to that specific pop-up. Maybe you're running a promotion. Maybe you're in the phase 2 of a store launch and you want to start, driving folks back into the store. So there's lots of ways that you can keep it customized so that it's not just an average, hey, you hit the site, give me your email. It's more like a handshake, like a welcome, come on in, take a look around. You can keep these integrations a lot more user-friendly so that the experience for these first-time users is a pleasant one.
Absolutely. Yeah, some really strong insight there. I mean, one of the things that I think about quite often as it relates to the current circumstances of e-commerce is really pushing merchants to think about these new customers that they're acquiring as someone who may have never purchased online before or may be reluctant to do so. So how can you take the experience that someone might get from a local mom and pop shop, in-person retail? Maybe they've got a sales associate there, a customer service representative, someone that can really walk them through a purchase process. And how can you take that experience, digitize it, and deliver it to these customers online? So really strong insights there, Cheri, on how merchants can start thinking about taking some of these traditional hands-on customer experiences that were previously exclusive to retail and bringing them online. Next, on this same topic, something that actually kind of blew my mind when I first started talking to Jonathan about it related to customer experience is the correlation between fraud prevention and new customer retention. It was definitely some really interesting insights and stats when I first heard it. So I'll kick it over to Jonathan and chat a little bit about how the two are more related than you might think at face value.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So fraud prevention probably isn't the top of mind when you're thinking about the customer experience for your customers, but the way I'll frame it is, you're spending, for merchants today, you're spending so much effort building a great customer experience, all those initial touch points to try to get them to your site and try to get them to convert. And if you don't have accurate fraud prevention, what can end up happening is that you end up declining them, when they try to check out or at some other point of the customer journey. New customer and your poor experience because they're excited, they want to purchase something, and they're getting declined because of whatever process or fraud prevention tools you have in place. And from Forder's point of view, we've seen similar stats as well, where across our merchant base, we've seen an increase in new customers by about 20 to 30% for apparel and retail customers, 40% for beauty, and it's pretty similar across different industries as well. And you just want to make sure that you have the most accurate fraud prevention possible, because when you decline a customer, especially when you're declining a legitimate customer, you're losing not just that sale, the value of that sale, but also that lifetime value. Will they come back? Will they try again? Will they have a relationship with your brand moving forward? And so you really should think about that, just because it's almost the last touch point in that conversion flow, and you want to make sure that they can get through and get what they want.
Awesome. Yeah, makes a ton of sense when you put it into context. I think that all too often in the e-commerce space, occasionally we fall into the trap of thinking about e-commerce as a transactional business and less so a relationship-driven business. And ultimately, I think that the key theme that will help a lot of you on the webinar today to retain some of these customers is really viewing them just as that each interaction is the opportunity to develop a long-term relationship, that rather than optimizing for just how do I get one more purchase today, it's how do I capture one new customer that's going to continue to purchase for me over the long run. And I guess rounding out our panel for this first question, so far pretty much everything we've chatted about has been related to the kind of on-site and pre-purchase, post-purchase digital customer experience, shifting a little bit to the physical delivery experience and the digital aspects that accompany that. I'll kick it over to Adam to chat about what merchants can be thinking about from a delivery experience perspective.
Yeah, I think there's so many important steps that happen from awareness and advertising, those top of funnel activities, and the in-store experience while they're on your site, and making sure that flows properly. It's easy to forget how much the customer views that post-purchase experience. Some research that we got from Accenture at the beginning of this year is that 84% of customers will not return to a brand after a bad delivery experience, right? And even more than that, more than 90% of customers blame the retailer when a delivery goes poorly. So it's absolutely something that is in your best interest to take control of, to pay attention to who's carrying for you, who's delivering, what is that experience, putting solutions in place, because you can recover from missed messaging and advertising, right? You can have another campaign that maybe captures that customer. You can recover from maybe not finding the item that they're looking for. But if a customer actually gives you their money and is waiting for the thing and they don't get it, or something goes wrong with that, that is much more difficult to recover from once they've exercised that trust and made a transaction with you. And especially in these circumstances where those delivery windows have been extended, where the major carriers have added wording to their service level agreements about essentially removing those delivery window guarantees. Ultimately, they're not the ones that are going to suffer from these extended windows. It's you and your brand. So take control of that. Put measures in place to make sure that you're still communicating and keeping in touch and resolving those issues for clients as they arise.
Awesome. Yeah, makes total sense and some great insight. I was going to actually chime in a little bit from the Shippo perspective on this one, but Adam's answer was so thorough and on point on the matter that I've talked enough, so we'll keep on moving. But just overall, the importance here is around communication, that admittedly these are challenging and uncertain times, and that sometimes out of necessity, you as a merchant are not going to be able to deliver the exact same experience you could 2-3 months ago. But rather than frown on that or pout, what's all the more critical is to communicate it in words that your customers are going to understand. Because what we've seen across the board here really is that while the times are challenging, customers in themselves are also have a great higher propensity for understanding these challenges. So over communication is definitely going to be critical as it relates to pre and post-purchase experience. So moving on to our second question, following the same theme, is knowing that a lot of customers who are shopping with various brands right now are doing so somewhat out of circumstance or out of necessity. And the fear for a lot of online merchants is what happens when that circumstance no longer exists? What happens when the Amazon Prime delivery windows are back to 1 and 2 days across the board? What happens when that customer can go walk down the street and visit their local convenience store or a local electronics store, apparel store, and shop there instead of on whatever online merchant that they've been shopping from? So I'll actually continue with Adam on this point to chat a little bit about how merchants can optimize for the experience and how they can retain these customers even after these circumstances have hopefully faded away.
Yeah, from our point of view, so much of retail shopping, brick and mortar shopping, and so much of Amazon shopping is muscle memory, right? It's familiar, it's easy. We've got a process there, and there's a lot of trust because I can buy a variety of products and have a different product experience, but I get the same shopping experience. I get the same delivery experience. Really, the goal then becomes, how can I make sure that my process is very familiar and just as easy so that you can build that same level of confidence in a time right now where, out of necessity, they've got to buy from somebody like you because you can actually deliver it faster than Amazon because Amazon's prioritized what they've deemed as essential items, which is great. That's an awesome initiative for them. But yeah, it's creating those muscle memories. So again, speaking to route strengths and what we've seen, so much of that post-purchase experience is where Amazon really dominates, right? I know for me personally, when I shop on Amazon, I can buy from a new seller, I can buy a new product, I can try something different. And I know that if there's anything wrong with that delivery experience, it doesn't matter who that seller is, Amazon's going to take care of me. They're going to resolve it. I've heard the joke that Amazon would burn a stack of money to keep a customer warm, right? And I know that could absolutely be the case for me. And so find those solutions, find those partners that enable you to act like Amazon without spending like Amazon, right? Find ways that you can make an amazing post-purchase experience where you can improve your communication so customers know as soon as their stuff is shipped, is out for delivery, has been delivered. Put solutions and processes in place to quickly resolve those issues as they arise when something does go wrong with delivery. And those are the experiences that are going to last. I'd mentioned before some of the negative sides about 84% of customers not returning to a brand after a bad delivery experience. But some of the amazing information that we've seen is that same 84% of customers will be more loyal to a brand that takes care of those post-purchase issues. And so you've absolutely got a huge opportunity there to take what would be a bad situation, turn it into a good one, and make a repeat customer out of them.
Absolutely. And echoing that point related to post-purchase experience, to me, this really comes down to this small window in time where brands have this opportunity to make a decision on whether or not they're going to capture this short-term transaction volume or they're going to forge long-term lasting relationships with these new customers. And the way to do the latter is really to prove to these customers that the experience they're getting from them is on par, if not better, than what they were getting in a pre-coronavirus world. And just to add a little bit more color from the data perspective, even something as potentially annoying to a merchant as a return can be a really strong opportunity to forge these long-term brand relationships. So I talk to a lot of merchants about this, and oftentimes talking about returns is never anyone's favorite thing to do. It's logistical burden, it's a supply chain burden, it's a negative piece on your balance sheet. But at the end of the day, if you choose to take this quote unquote negative aspect and treat it as such, you're not just losing this one transaction where you're now processing a return. you're potentially losing this customer forever. And in data that we've seen at Shippo, in fact, 95% of buyers that claim to have a positive return experience say that they're extremely likely to go back and purchase from that merchant again. Compare that to folks who have a negative return experience. And to put that in context, you're compiling essentially two negative things on top of one another. First, for whatever reason, whether it was the wrong size, the wrong item, something went wrong in the process, or maybe you just didn't like it, whatever you ordered, you don't want it and you want to return it. Couple that with having to go through multiple layers of customer support, email, chat, arguing with them, maybe taking care of the return shipping all on your own. You combine those two and the likelihood that customer is coming back diminishes to under 25%. So right there, you've got a delta of over 65% gain from just optimizing for that positive return experience. So again, the theme for me is really, it's not about the transactions, it's about the long-term relationship. And I'm gonna pass it over to, starting with Cheri, to chat a little bit more about customer experience from a marketing perspective, and then we'll hit on a couple more of the panelists before moving on.
Hey, thanks, Mario. Yeah, I was just going to throw in there with the post-purchase series of emails. This is a really good opportunity to have a one-on-one connection with your customer. That's not just, hey, thanks for buying. It's like looking at what they purchased, when they purchased, how frequent they purchased. You know, you can kind of turn this into a personal relationship instead of, and trust me, I love Amazon just like everybody else, but after you purchase for a while, you just get this flux of emails for maybe something you've only purchased once or twice and you don't really need it again. The advantage that you guys have is that you can have a more catered relationship with your client. Like, hey, you know what? You've purchased this 3 times and you bought it in these different colors. We think you might like that. Or, hey, you know what? You're qualifying now for our VIP program. So we're going to let you know when we have sales in advance now. So you can kind of really enhance that relationship post-purchase with your customer base.
Awesome. Yep, makes a lot of sense, all resonating around that customer experience. And rounding out our panel on this second question, I'm going to pass it over to David from Avex to elaborate a little bit more on the strong correlation between visual identity and customer retention.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, unlike Amazon, where it's kind of the same format, you're kind of one of many different products where you're mostly comparing price. In that case, with your own site, you do control your visual identity, and you do control your brand story and how you show that on your site. And that's important when you're making people see, okay, I don't want to buy your products. That's just like, they obviously want you to buy their product, but they want to buy you for you, not just because of the items that you sell. And I think that's really powerful for customer retention, because all of a sudden you're no longer someone who sells a commodity. You sell something much greater. You sell a mission or a story or a message. And for a lot of like the biggest brands out there, they may have started as merchants or businesses, but they eventually translate into really full-fledged brands that stand for something. And I think that's a really powerful way to compete with Amazon and even physical retail, because again, they want to buy from you specifically. They don't just want the specific product you have. And that's, I think, one of the most powerful things that a merchant can have.
Awesome, and very, very well said. It's almost akin to, there's a aspect of loyalty when consumers shop at, say, their local apparel store, their local mom and pop shop. It's that camaraderie with the business owner, with the brand, that experience they've built up over time of living in that certain area. Really, right now is a great opportunity for online brands to try to forge the same. That, again, you don't want to just be a means to an end or a opportunity for transaction. If you can build that affinity between your brand and your customers, those people are going to think of you into the future, not just when they need something short term. So moving on, unless anyone has any last comments on our second question here, to our next point, getting a little bit more tactical on the logistics side of things, and Adam hinted on this a little bit earlier. But without further ado, with this influx of volume and all the logistical challenges that coronavirus presents for merchants and their customers, are you or we, as the panel of experts, seeing any major delays or changes in fulfillment? And if so, how can your business adapt to overcome these challenges? So I'll quickly start on this, as Shippo has quite a bit of data on the subject. So I'll start with good and bad news. Starting with the bad news, certainly from an international perspective, there's been a pretty significant degradation in service on a couple different levels, from the USPS and all of their partners across the other domestic carriers that they rely on for last mile delivery for international shipments. Coronavirus has had a significant impact on that flow. In fact, not only are there significant delays for various international shipments, the USPS currently is not even accepting volume for international priority mail, international first class mail, to a list of dozens of countries. And if folks are kind of curious about the full list, by all means, ping me and I'm happy to share more context there. But that's been a pretty big hindrance to US-based merchants who are trying to sell internationally. On the flip side, the private carriers, DHL, Express, UPS, FedEx, have held up quite strong from an international shipping perspective, that to their credit, you can get a shipment almost anywhere in the world today, leveraging these services, these private carriers who are a bit more vertically integrated. However, that comes at a bit of a cost. We've seen all three of them levying additional surcharges on a lot of international shipments. So while you can definitely make it happen, you're certainly paying a premium for things internationally right now. So that's more of the quote unquote bad news. But in terms of things that I see as being very optimistic and very positive as it relates to fulfillment and logistics, at least domestically here in the US, is that despite, I think, the carriers being very cautious and putting out statements along the lines of, we've expanded our delivery window by a day on either end of the spectrum, or we are no longer guaranteeing certain windows. Generally speaking, from our data at Shippo, across the spectrum of all of the most popular domestic e-commerce shipping services across USPS Priority Mail, USPS First Class, UPS Ground, UPS Second Day Air, FedEx Ground, FedEx Overnight, the windows for delivery for these from our actuals, again, actuals being time from label, print, and pickup to actual delivery, have not fluctuated very much during the COVID period since prior to that. So generally speaking, merchants are still equipped with the ability to get their orders out in a timely fashion, or at least rely on the carriers to do so domestically. So the question really, or the opportunity that presents, is really in this time period where folks like Amazon or other larger retailers are struggling to get orders out in a timely fashion. It actually creates this interesting opportunity for some smaller brands, independent brands, SMBs, who can still rely on these strong services from the carriers and deliver that 2-day shipping, deliver that 3-day door-to-door shipping, when oftentimes the same item might take a week, might take 10 days from an Amazon or a larger retailer. And I'll kick it over to Route to continue on a similar topic here related to tracking and delivery quality amid the logistical challenges of COVID.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that we see is a lot of just the consumer perception of these things. So you may not realistically be actually seeing slowed down delivery times domestically, like Mario said, right? But as far as customers are concerned, as soon as they get on Amazon and see that 2-day shipping or next day shipping is no longer available, they believe that it's not available anywhere, right? Just that establishment of Amazon always having that top tier experience, it makes us think that anybody else must also be struggling with the same thing. So it's twofold. It's the opportunity for you to exceed those expectations, because there is a reality, there is, circumstances they're dealing with, but But in your circumstances, a lot of cases, these carriers can still get it to them in those 3 to 5 days or whatever your standard delivery windows are. So there's changes in perception, but you can continue to operate as normal. You know, I say that carefully, as normal, to get those orders out the door and into your customers' hands. And that really becomes an opportunity to go above and beyond those expectations. The other side of it, though, is that there are some very real things that we're seeing. We've seen 130% increase in stolen package claims, right? The porch pirates, the people that are usually out around the holidays following delivery trucks, like they know that this increase in e-commerce is going on too. And so they're still out there like stealing packages, making a bad experience for everybody, regardless of whether or not you did your job well, and regardless of whether or not the carrier did their job well. We've absolutely seen an increase in damaged packages as these carriers do their best to keep up with it. And so whether or not that's impacted you and your company directly, the customer sees it. The customers know this is an issue and they're uncertain about it. So one of the biggest changes that you can make is just anticipate that and communicate with the customers, adopt policies and find partners that will allow you to take care of those situations. They're not directly your fault. But again, the consumer views it that way. They gave you their money. They expect you to help them resolve it. And this is a great chance just to continue to meet and exceed those expectations in a really delightful way that again, creates that lasting impact that after things maybe go back to some form of normal, they remember those experiences and they want to continue to patronize your store.
Yes, makes total sense. And the unfortunate reality, while I think that the majority of folks have kind of banded together in this time in some form of solidarity, it definitely, with less people out and about on the streets, a little bit more turmoil, it definitely creates this opportunity for the small percentage of folks who might want to do malicious things to take advantage of stealing packages, following trucks, like you said, Adam. I think following on that note, I know that there's also been, I don't want to say necessarily changes, I'll second to Jonathan from Forder on this, but return fraud and return claims are another thing that are coming up right now amid COVID. So I'll kick it over to Jonathan from Forder to elaborate a little bit more on the return process and return claims from what he's been seeing.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. So I think there are kind of two things. It's a slight different flavor in terms of answering this question, but one thing, tacking on to what Adam was talking about in stolen packages, when your customers aren't receiving the items that they ordered on time, whether it's due to logistical issues, shipping issues, or if their packages are being stolen, just making sure that you have a process around your business policy for dealing with these claims. You might refund them, you might ship them a new item, etc. But being very clear that that this is a legitimate claim or not. I think we've seen spikes in claims for item not received, depending on your business. You might call it no product received or lost parcel, where customers who a lot of merchants want to provide the best customer experience, so they refund the order, or they basically trust that the customer is filing a claim legitimately. But something to also think about is, from some of our data, we've seen that for when customers are filing claims, depending on your industry and the location, 3 to 13% of item not received claims are actually abusive or fraudulent. So being able to walk that line between, do I actually refund this customer their entire order, or do I believe that they're fraudulent and taking advantage of my business policy? They've done this multiple times. They've created new accounts and tried to take advantage of it this way. So I think that's just something to be aware of, because you really do have to walk a fine line. You might end up you don't want to provide a bad customer experience to a legitimate customer, but you don't want fraudsters to just walk all over your business and file all of these claims and take a good chunk off of your top line. And in terms of returns, I think returns is definitely something that's tougher in this market. A lot of the retail stores and stores are closed down, so your returns channel becomes especially important. It's when you ship the item to the customer, that's their only way really of now interacting with your brand, with the items that they're buying. And so I think you should really be prepared for increased returns, which is what we've seen as well. Just making sure that you're able to support that system and the architecture and make sure that's also legitimate. We've seen across data, and this is generally data in the market, about 1 in 10 items or orders is generally returned. But of those 1 in 10 returned items, about 8 to 10% of those are generally abusive or fraudulent returns, whether it's someone who's wardrobing, wearing it out to a party or gala. It might not be happening now, or sending back a fraudulent item and kind of trying to recoup the value. Those are things that you have to be aware of, because you're trying to walk that line between providing the best customer experience and trying to, help your legitimate customers. So making sure that abusers don't just take advantage of your returns policies as well. So I think these are two things that are a little different flavor than what Mario and Adam talked about, but they're important for you to think about when you're trying to provide the best customer experience, given the COVID-19 world that we're living in today.
Makes total sense. And out of my own curiosity, and I'm assuming that if I'm curious about it, at least a few more folks potentially may have the same question in attendance. From the perspective of a merchant, whether that be things that they can do on their own or things that they can do in partnership with Forder, what are some key ways, or how do I as a merchant go about identifying potentially fraudulent claim for a return or a damaged item compared to a valid one? What are things that merchants can be looking out for? And how can you, if we're seeing a 10% return rate with then another 10% of that, so 1% of all total purchases being potentially fraudulent returns, how can I go about identifying that one in the 10?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the business. Some will be very apparent where, you've shipped them something, they ship back an empty box, or they ship back something just to make it seem like there's something in the box, where when it gets back to your fulfillment center, you're like, that is fraudulent. And you basically will, one way a lot of merchants will try to tackle is maybe blacklisting them. So that email address on that account, we're not shipping to them anymore. We're not allowing them to transact anymore. You might have manual review teams actually going through, and when you've identified that a particular account has been abusive, just actually blacklisting them as well, almost in a manual review process. And how Forder does it, it's really an automated decision. So we're able to see all this customer behavior linked together. If this person is actually trying to hide their identity, are they creating this under a new email address? Have we seen their card before? And providing a decision to the merchants saying, hey, should you actually allow this returns to be initiated, or should you allow this transaction to go through, given that we know that this is a serial abuser that's tried to return 80% of their orders on over $15,000 of items. And so really working with the merchant to be able to help them identify what they see as either fraudulent or abusive. So those are kind of some of the ways in the market that you can tackle that today.
Awesome. Thank you for elaborating on that. Definitely something that I personally haven't thought about a lot, and very interesting and timely for the folks in attendance. So quickly moving on to our fourth question here, specific to differentiation. So up until this point, we've talked about kind of a blue ocean strategy of e-commerce being either the circumstantial choice or even the necessary choice for commerce right now. Amazon slightly lagging behind, creating opportunity for independent brands to meet customer demand. But what we haven't really chatted about as much to this point of the session is, how do you all of you in attendance compete against each other, knowing that even if you are the alternative when physical retail might not be possible, there might be 2, 3, 4, several more folks selling a similar item, similar service to you. So in addition to just providing the best customer experience right now, what are additional things that you can do as a brand to really differentiate yourself from the alternatives? And starting from the marketing and design perspective, let's start out with David from Avex, and then move into Cheri from Hawke, who both have some really strong insights on marketing differentiation for merchants right now.
Sure. So I will say it does depend on what stage the merchant is in. So if it's a merchant that, for example, is just kind of started and they've set up and they haven't really done e-commerce before, the thing they'll want to focus on more is, let's say, like acquisition, either through like email or paid media. But if you're a merchant who, you've seen an influx of sales because of COVID and you're not sure what to do with them, a couple of great things you can do is to kind of build retention, is to focus on building brand attribution. And you can do that by a series of things, including brand loyalty through different like rewards programs or affiliate marketing to try to get both like UGC and social proof. And show that people really love like your brand and your products, because essentially you want to think about why they're coming back, or why a customer is kind of shopping with you, and why they feel appreciated. And a great way of doing that is through those different strategies and tactics. Because if you're a brand that sells a commodity like coffee, and the person really likes the brand, they like the product, and you have some kind of loyalty program, well, to them that is going to motivate them to make more purchases, because they can get points or some other type of benefit that they can use to that they can then use to, I guess, buy more within your own brand ecosystem. So making them feel rewarded and giving them that incentive to buy again with you guys, that's kind of a great way of kind of capturing that retention and making them like you more. Because if people like your brand and they look at you positively, they'll be more likely to shop with you versus a competitor, even if that competitor does offer a lower price. Maybe what if their product is perhaps objectively slightly better? That's really hard to measure. But I think, if people like you, those things are going to be less important.
Awesome. And I think also sticking to the design and marketing theme, I know that Cheri also has some insights here, so why don't you take it away?
Yeah, I can David, just piggyback on what you were just saying with the loyalty programs. It's more along the lines of, you guys have the opportunity to send the right message, and you have the opportunity to send it at the right time. So with everything going on, we keep bringing up Amazon and, fulfillment issues and things like that. The ability to keep things personal. I know I've said this numerous times already. It's really key in building that relationship. I like to think of email automations. I actually jokingly call them money-making mations, because they are such great revenue drivers. When you get your email marketing automation set up correctly, and by that I mean strategically looking at who's buying what, when are they buying, how frequently are they buying, have they gone radio silent, do they use SMS over email more? When you pay attention to things like this, you can actually start to customize journeys in these workflows to feel much more personal to your customer base. SMS is something that I haven't really touched on much, but I do want to make sure I address, as it's a very lucrative market right now. I know we're all on our computers a lot, and I did mention that that desktop rates are kind of through the roof. SMS is another kind of co-branded way to work with that. So a lot of the strategies that we're working on in the same voice as staying personal is working SMS along with email. I know some folks may look at one versus the other. We like to think of them as something that works together. We have programs where we'll maybe send out an email to notify a launch of something. Maybe you have a new product. Maybe you have a product back in stock. We can then in that email say, hey, if you want to join on our VIP program, give us your cell, and we'll send you an SMS text message in advance to when the program launches, and you'll have an extra day to purchase these products. Again, bringing that like personal touch back and making those folks feel the value that, hey, like you guys really are listening. I like this product, and you're gonna just let me know in advance on SMS that I can purchase. Great, this is fantastic. So there's ways you can do that with email and SMS. And then again, with the different types of automations, the loyalty programs, birthday emails are fantastic. Giving folks either an elaborate discount that maybe you normally don't do, or simply giving them an opportunity for an item that maybe is out of stock or limited, that they get a chance to purchase that, a BOGO opportunity. There's lots of fun ways that you can really increase the value for your clients so that the customer lifetime value increases. That's something that I think you want to make sure you're paying attention to as the funnel's getting filled. Like I said, it's real easy to make sure that somebody makes a purchase off that welcome email, but how do you get them to come back? How do you get them to make more purchases? How do you get them to retain? How do you get them to become a brand advocate? How do you get them to make or leave a review on your product? These are all things that email can help do, and you can do that all within automations so that these things are running on the back end, kind of without you even really noticing that they're there. But your customers are going to notice that because they're going to be set up to feel a lot more personal than just a batch and blast email.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up SMS, and I'll be fully transparent as a marketer myself. It definitely is a bit more of a new frontier. It's not something that I have a lot of experience in, nor has Shippo really moved into that space. So out of my own curiosity, and I hope the curiosity of folks on the attendee list as well, what are some potential kind of best practices as it relates to capturing phone numbers to use for SMS marketing? Like, is it something that, is it a best practice to call out specifically, hey, give us your phone number such that we can send you this specific info? Or are you seeing more brands kind of gathering that as an aggregate and potentially like a checkout or a sign up and then coming back to use it later? Or what have you kind of seen in terms of best practices as it relates to dipping your toe in the water for the first time of collecting phone numbers and leveraging SMS marketing?
Yeah, it is. It's like a big scary thing. Like, what is this SMS? Like, how does it work? We've actually seen both of those that you mentioned, Mario, happen, right? So it kind of depends on your vertical. It kind of depends on your business. I want to echo back to what I talked about at the top of the webinar, which was those light boxes that pop up on your desktop versus your mobile. So when it pops up on your mobile, a really easy way to grab folks for SMS is right then and there. There's a lot of great platforms out there. There's ESPs that now use SMS as well, where you can make it so easy for folks to fill out those forms to capture the phone numbers. So then you can begin the automations and messages from SMS. And similar to email, you want to mirror that same process. You want to have welcome SMSs. You want to have site and cart abandonment SMS messages. So you can get really creative, and your data will tell you what your audience prefers. Data mining is key when you're working in any type of automation, whether it be email or SMS. But they will tell you what they like and what they don't like. It's just, you have to make sure you're paying attention to that data so that you're delivering the right messages at the right time.
Makes total sense, and hopefully everyone else found that helpful, but if nothing else, that definitely helps me think about marketing for my own career, so thank you very much there. Continuing, moving on from the kind of marketing side of the equation over to Forder around kind of the risk versus reward mitigation. So Jonathan, as you're thinking about all of these differentiated customer experiences, how do you do so without exposing yourself to too much risk, or how do you leverage that risk versus reward balance when investing in some of these new programs, whether it be promotions, communications, loyalty offers, things like that?
Yeah, I think the big thing to note here is, fraudsters and abusers are constantly, they're just going to try to take advantage of your business in any openings that they can find. So that's always something that's going to happen, whether it's at the point of purchase, whether you're running a loyalty program, running different promotions, like people will try to take advantage of it and abuse those. And from Forder's point of view, the important thing is that you don't want that to hold you back from offering the customer experiences or the offerings that you want to deliver to your customers to really differentiate yourself. I think you need to make sure that you have a fraud prevention solution that is able to identify and stop that various types of fraud and abuse, so that you're not scaling back on your marketing efforts, on your promotional efforts, or all of these cool ideas that your team is coming up with to build relationships with your customers. I think one example, just to think about it, about this is, I think everyone knows the story about LL Bean. I'm sorry if you're on this webinar, where they got rid of their 100-year return policy because people were abusing it. And that's one of those things where you don't want to hurt the customer experience or scale back your customer experience that you're providing to everyone because of a very small number of abusers. It was probably, take a guess, like less than 1% of those were actual abusers, but they were heavy abusers. And you have to think about that in terms of all the offerings that you're thinking about, whether it's your returns program, a new loyalty program you want to roll out, new promotions you want to offer. You want to provide those to all of your good customers. Just make sure you have a process or a tool in place to stop abusers so that it doesn't make it financially impossible, or it makes it possible for you to actually go forward with it.
Awesome. Makes total sense. Yeah, the key here really seems to be how can you offer the very best for the customer without exposing yourself to too much risk there. And to round out this this fourth question, shifting away a little bit from the digital and the marketing side of things to the customer experience and the physical delivery experience, Adam, why don't you touch on a little bit of how brands can leverage that delivery experience in a differentiated way to distinguish themselves from the alternatives?
Yeah, again, from previous responses that I've shared, you just got to remember that more than 80% of those customers are really sizing up their decision to purchase from you again in that post-purchase experience. And there's great ways over text and email that you can communicate with them. You know, not to make too much of a plug for Route and our own solutions, because there's a lot of great ways you can do that. Mario, you touched on making an amazing returns experience. There's folks out there that are, you know, creating ways for you to drop off returns instead of having to print labels. You know, there's some awesome things that you can do. Really a big focus of Route is communicating with customers in a 2020 fashion, right? We've got solutions to turn those tracking notifications into push notifications. So they don't have to be buried in email. They don't have to require the user to go dig in and find that. And as you can imagine, like I get that experience when I shop on Amazon, right? Through the Amazon app, it tells me my order update. I don't have to go to email. I don't have to use any other channel to understand what's going on with my order or reach back out. And imagine if you can provide a similar experience as a direct-to-consumer brand without the network and the resources of Amazon to still give your customer that type of experience. And so finding ways that you can automate that communication and keep them in the loop every step of the way with what's going on, automating anything that goes wrong in that process, but just giving them the assurance that you are still talking to them during that post-purchase experience, and that they don't believe that that you think that you're done at the time that they give you their money, right? That they're still very much committed in this transaction, waiting to get the thing that they bought. You know, the more you can go above and beyond during that stage, those are, this is not just us, the data shows those are absolutely key moments for the customer determining whether or not they're going to repurchase with you.
Absolutely, and admittedly, I'm biased on the topic, but couldn't agree more. And before we move on to our final question, I'll add a little bit as it relates to the shipping side of the equation. And like Adam, by no means is the intention here for a sales pitch of Shippo, that there's a lot of great ways that you can leverage the same results, because the key of it is really how do you use shipping as a competitive advantage. And right now, as there is so much uncertainty, as you might scroll through Amazon and see a 2-week delivery time on an item that previously would be 2 days or 1 day, or you scroll through several of your potential alternatives or competitors and notice that, sure, while they're still up and running, they're not necessarily delivering that certainty that we want and we crave for as consumers. So from the perspective of differentiating your brand, I really think that right now the importance of shipping is ever greater, in that if you can leverage a network of multiple different shipping carriers and have data on how each of them are performing and how their service levels are impacted, or in a lot of cases not impacted by COVID-19, you really stand to benefit from being one of the only folks in the entire space that can deliver that certainty. And from our own data at Shippo, we've seen that over 75% of consumers say that they will choose between merchants based on shipping. So what that means is that if you're in a potentially crowded space, or there's multiple alternative ways that your customers could get a similar service to you elsewhere, if you're the only one that can market a 2-day guaranteed delivery, or a 3-day, or even if it's 5 days, but just being able to provide that message even before the point of purchase of a reassuring, hey, if you make this purchase before 3 p.m. today, you're going to get that item by Saturday, or you're going to get that item by Monday. That level of certainty, especially in these uncertain times, stands to pay pretty enormous dividends for your brand. So one piece of advice that I'm giving to really all merchants that I speak to is that regardless of what you feel like you can guarantee, if it's 2 days, that's incredible. if it's one day you're the top 0.1%, even if your guarantee is 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, getting that information in front of your customers so that they have that degree of certainty and trust that when they click that buy button, it's not going into a void, and that they're assured in these uncertain times that their item is going to come in a timely manner, can really make the difference on whether or not someone's purchasing from you or purchasing from someone else. And with just about 5+ minutes to go, rounding out our final question of the day that we haven't touched on much, we've alluded to it, but all of our prior questions were really around like, what are tactics you can do? What are marketing strategies? What are customer experience strategies? But at the end of the day, if the marketing analyst on my team was sitting behind me, he'd be smacking me in the backside of the head, asking me, but Mario, all this cool stuff, how do I track it? How do I know that what I'm doing actually makes sense? So to round out our discussion today, our final question really is that. What are the metrics that you as a merchant should be looking at to actually understand whether or not these efforts that you're putting forth are really paying the dividends you want? And to start things out on our final question here, I'll kick it over to Jonathan from Forder.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one, especially from Forder's point of view, is conversion rates. How many people are getting to the point of conversion? And then more specifically from Forder's point of view, I think it's also important to look at approval rates. So of the people who you get to a conversion, how many are you as a merchant actually approving? I think that varies widely across industries. You know, how many of them are able to actually process that transaction successfully, get the item or service that they want? So conversion rates and approval rates from Forder's POV here.
Absolutely. And passing on to our marketing folks, starting with Avex, what are you seeing, David, as being critical metrics right now for brands?
So we always encourage a lot of our brands to check the conversion funnel of their customers. Essentially, if you have your analytics set up through Google and a few others properly, you can essentially track, what a user goes through, the different channels to actually make a purchase. So it could be they land on your site through an ad and then they leave, go on your social medias, and then come back to your site and then see patterns of how long it takes for that conversion to happen, the different channels. So if you see that it's a really strong thing is, paid media, then social, then site, and then purchase, how to optimize the different channels in a way to make purchase more likely. If a lot of people are going to your socials, you can then focus on that a lot more from like a content perspective and also from a messaging perspective to kind of really understand what journey your customer takes and how long, because sometimes a customer doesn't buy in one day, sometimes it could take several days depending on the vertical. So I think it's important to understand that. In addition, something that I don't think a lot of people leverage from a data learning side is looking at customer support tickets, in a sense that what questions or complaints do people have often? If you're getting a lot of questions about a particular product and it's information they can't find on the product page, well, you might want to consider then, optimizing the content on those product pages to have that information they're looking for, so that you don't continue to get those same inquiries in your ticketing system. And then depending on how advanced your kind of customer support is, if you're using some kind of chatbot that is automations, you can set macros to essentially quickly have, automatically answer some of these really common or core questions, so that service time, you're also allowing your actual team to dedicate attention onto those really personal, important, unique questions versus the mundane and common. So those are, I guess, two that we really advise on our clients to kind of focus on.
Absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't have immediately gravitated towards the correlation between the customer support tickets and the product descriptions, but that makes so much sense. Not only are you getting smarter, but the byproduct of successfully optimizing those descriptions are likely going to be a big cost saver as well, in terms of reducing the tickets you're getting from repeat questions. And in the couple of minutes we've got left, I know Cheri from Hawke, you've chatted a bit already about various data points you're leveraging for choosing communication medium, engagement rates on email and SMS. Is there anything else that you'd like to add as it relates to like what metrics brands can be looking at and how they can use those metrics to optimize their lifecycle marketing right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll just reiterate, like, look at where your purchases are coming from. Are they purchasing immediately off the welcome series? If they're not, maybe we have to work a little harder. Where are they purchasing from? Are they purchasing from a promotional email? Or did they purchase from a different automation that maybe you set up based on product interest and purchase history? But when you analyze those data, your open rates, your click-through rates, your purchase history, you can also correlate that to time on site. Like, what links did they click to and how long did they hang out, and did it turn into a purchase? You know, you can get a much bigger, fuller picture of who your customer is looking at all those data points and analyzing them correctly.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing. And finally, before we close out, I want to give Adam a chance to share any last words here because we hadn't gotten to him yet.
Yeah, no, just briefly, I would say include those post-purchase elements in your surveys and your customer satisfaction questions. Get those data points. Don't assume that just because it was delivered that the customer is happy with that experience, right? Dig into it, ask it. It's similar to what David was pointing out. Look at those support tickets. Look and see. I bet there's a good chunk of people that are asking, where's my order? Where's my stuff? When am I going to get this? That's an indication that you can do a better job communicating to your clients what's going on with their order after they leave that landing page or after that confirmation page. So I don't think we have a magic bullet metric other than include those post-purchase elements in your customer satisfaction inquiries, in those surveys and those follow-ups, so that it is informing that overall score that you're benchmarking yourself against.
Awesome. Makes total sense. And on that note, we're just at 12 when we promised to let everyone go. So we won't drown on any longer. But before we leave, just wanted to say a huge thank you to all four of the panelists for sharing a ton of very relevant and insightful information. And most importantly, thank you everyone who joined to listen in today. I truly hope that you're walking away with some strategies and tips that are going to help you to better run your businesses, both right now and long into the future. We will absolutely share the slides with everyone as a follow-up, and you'll have the contact information from all of the relevant panelists and their companies for any one-to-one follow-ups. We're happy to answer any further questions over email and we'll help you get those directed to the right parties. But on that note, thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to close out the webinar right now. Everyone have a great rest of your afternoon. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay successful, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks everybody.